Good morning, everybody. I'm David M, as Matt said. I work in the Global Research and Analysis team at Kaspersky Lab. So we're focused very much on some of the more sophisticated APTs, or advanced persistent threats. But actually today, I want to sort of step back a little bit and give a sort of high-level view of the threat landscape in the round, and what are the trends that we're seeing, what sort of malware are we seeing, how is it spreading, what impact is it having, and so on. First of all, if we talk about the scale of the threat, we've actually seen phenomenal growth in the last 30 years. I mean, when I started in this industry, we were analyzing malware basically in its ones and twos each month. I think when I started, there were about 90 viruses, and they could all be named, and they all had descriptions. Right now, we get about 1 million objects in our virus lab every day. Now, 99.9% of those are analyzed automatically. So we make heavy use of machine learning. That's got to be combined with human expertise in order to be effective. But nevertheless, that's the sort of volume that we're seeing. So it's huge, and it's ramped up in different stages. Particularly, one of the biggest changes we saw was around about 2003 or 4, when we saw the move towards malware for profit, as opposed to cyber vandalism, which is what we saw before that date. And we saw huge, massive growth in numbers. So it's a big problem in terms of volume. Many of the threats that we see are web-based, unsurprisingly, because that's the obvious way to catch someone these days. You can pick whichever of these numbers are most stand out for you. About 60 attacks per second that are web-based. So going back to Matt's thing about it being more common than rain in this country, actually that's huge. That's a worldwide number. So there is no escape from this in the sense that we're all potential targets. Now, I've drawn the threat landscape as a whole here as a pyramid. And the base of that pyramid, and the vast bulk of it, is actually random speculative type attacks of the sort that could impact any individual or actually any business as well. So here, the people behind it are not targeting you or me. They don't care. It's just whoever's unlucky enough or rash enough to do something that jeopardizes their security or the security of the company that they work for. The top 10%, well, these are targeted attacks. And this is where the attackers are specifically going after this or that company, or they're going after a vertical within the marketplace, or they're going for a range of verticals within the marketplace. But there, they need to do their reconnaissance, they need to do their intelligence gathering, they need to know their target, and they need to choose what mechanism to use to get into that company. Now, ironically enough, whether it's something at the base of that pyramid or right at the top, the mechanism for getting at that system is typically going to be compromising an individual, hacking the human, so to speak. Now, right at the top, we've got the area where governments get involved. So we all do things that we've done generation after generation, just we use technology now to do it. And that's no different for governments. They're trying to disrupt what their potential adversaries are doing. They're trying to find out what their potential adversaries are doing, and they're using computers to do it. The issue is that all of these things we've done for generations are easier and quicker and cheaper than they were in the real world, and actually you can cover your tracks a lot easier than you could with a real-time attack. Now, I've painted these as categories, but they're not hard and fast containers. For one thing, there's a trickle down. So if something developed at the tip of that pyramid, if it finds its way into the public domain, then gives ideas to people lower down, or indeed gives them ready-made code lower down that pyramid, things that they would not have had the expertise to develop for themselves, or the time, or the money. Now, equally, I mean, I can't say there's a trickle up, that wouldn't work, but what happens lower down the pyramid also gets used by targeted attackers. If you are something like the Lazarus Group, or Sophacy, or Equation or Duku or whatever the targeted attack group is, the chances are that there are some giveaway clues that point to it being a targeted attack, and maybe a nation state, maybe a sophisticated commercial criminal group. But anyway, as a way of throwing people off the tracks, they will quite often use code off the shelf, developed lower down that food chain, in order to make it less obvious that they are targeted attackers. So how does malware spread? And I've identified 4 areas here. The first is the use of exploit kits. So they look for flaws or vulnerabilities in software, and they develop exploit code that uses that loophole to get into the system. So an example, there may be a vulnerability in Adobe Acrobat Reader. So they will utilize that in order to create a malicious PDF, which is delivered via email, and when you click on it, you don't just load up whatever PDF document it is, but you allow that malware inside it to install. Naturally enough, they target what are the most commonly used applications. So yeah, Adobe Acrobat Reader, Microsoft Office, Android, Java, all of these things with a wide distribution base, but which often don't get updated by the people on the ground. Social networks, they're a great way of gathering intel if you're launching a targeted attack, but actually they're used directly to spread malware through links in particular. So those 2 mechanisms are valuable to cyber criminals and targeted attackers alike. Email, I mean, it may not get used out here on the campus by students because they're using other mechanisms, but in business it is a key communication mechanism, and therefore it becomes a delivery vector for malware, either by means of an attachment or through a link. And finally, I've got the graphic up there for a USB, but actually this could be any way of parachuting something in easily and quickly. Yes, a USB key. I'm not necessarily thinking about people leaving them in the car park for somebody to pick up, although that does happen. I'm thinking rather of the fact that I work at home on something and my system at home is infected. I copy that document, let's say, to USB key, take it into the office the next day, and I've just bypassed the firewall and all the other technical filters that are in place and infected the system. It could be equally true about a CD. It could be equally true about Dropbox or WeTransfer or some other mechanism like that as well. So some examples of the types of threats. Well, banking Trojans have been with us as long as we've had malware for profit. It's an obvious way to make money. So they're typically spread using exploits or social engineering tricks. And in terms of what they're doing, well, they're looking to capture keystrokes. They're looking to capture mouse clicks. They're looking to manipulate the system, for example, the hosts file, in order to direct you to a fake site. They're doing everything they can to be able to capture your data. This also extends to mobile devices. So, you know, in those cases where a mobile device is used for a second factor of authentication, if they can capture that one-time passcode as well as the static login and password details, then they're in. In terms of numbers, you can see it varies here, but these are last year's figures. Anything from about 60,000 to 120,000 blocked attacks per month. So this is what we're seeing at Kaspersky Lab. And this data comes courtesy of our cloud infrastructure, the Kaspersky Security Network. This is just what we're seeing. It's not the totality of what's out there, because not everybody is running Kaspersky Lab software. Not yet, anyway. So it's an underestimate, but it's a big business. What else? Well, ransomware is a huge headline type story these days. Few people haven't heard about ransomware. And although relatively speaking, it's declined somewhat in the last 2 years, it's still huge. So the idea behind it is that you either lock the system and stop people using it and therefore insist on getting a payment for that to unlock it, or you go the extra mile and you encrypt the data on that system and extort money from people that way. And they've got more and more sophisticated as the years have gone by. So some of them are very low level, targeting the MBR, or master boot record, the first physical sector on the disk. Some of them will just lock it, which is fairly easy to do. Some of them will target business systems. They'll go after websites specifically. Some will target mobile devices. So it's very varied landscape. So what do they look at? Well, the lockers will look something like this. So they'll put a message on the screen saying, hey, you've been accessing some illegal content, and there's a spot fine for doing that. In the one case of that one, it's a Russian one. It's 1,000 rubles, which is very, very low. Others will pretend to be scanning the system so that they lend credibility to this. Different languages, because what they will typically do is include multiple languages in the code and display the right one depending on the geolocation of the victim. Well, that's fairly straightforward to do. With crypto ransomware, they're looking to encrypt the data. So this one, CoinVault, was basically blocked a few years ago, but the MO is very typical. So if we zone in on that, they're going to typically have a countdown. You have 5 days to pay, otherwise you lose your data. They'll have a free decrypt to prove to you that they can decrypt their data. And they nearly always do, because otherwise you're never going to fall for it again. But they don't always. They're criminals after all. So they will try to persuade you. They provide a mechanism for helping you to pay. If you don't know how Bitcoin works, they'll talk you through it. And we see lots and lots of these. You might recognize this one. This was WannaCry from a couple of years ago. Huge, huge thing, because it spread on the back of an exploit that hadn't been patched, even though the patch was available. It doesn't always turn out that they're looking to get money. This is Xpetra or NotPetya, looked like ransomware, was actually a wiper. It was designed right from the start to wipe data on the system. This cost Maersk, the big shipping organization, about 300 million. Same with TNT Express. Same with lots of other companies. Big money. In terms of numbers, much the same sort of numbers as with banking Trojans. So, you know, we're talking about tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands every month in terms of attacks that our products have blocked. Well, what else? We've seen a huge hike in cryptocurrency mining. Everybody's interested in it. Everybody wants to get in on the ground floor of the next big cryptocurrency, and criminals are no different. The difference is maybe I'll create a rig to mine cryptocurrency for myself. They want to use my equipment to do it. So they're looking to sneak their way onto our systems and use our processing power to generate cryptocurrency for them. If they can get into an organization, so much the better. Because once they've got a foothold in an organization, they have many, many more machines at their disposal. Sometimes we get, I suppose, what you'd call drive-by cryptocurrency mining, where there's a script on the website, and when you go to that page, for as long as you're on it, they're mining in the background using your processor. So what about the numbers? Well, not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands. So this is like any other business. Capital flows into where it's going to be more productive. And right now, this is very productive for the criminals. And it's silent. Unlike ransomware, it's a silent attacker. Now, mobile devices are a key component of our lives, in business and our personal lives as well. And for many years, they've been targeted by attackers. We saw about 5.3 million malicious apps last year. That's actually down on the previous year. That's the good news. The bad news is a few less apps were used in twice the number of attacks. So we see everything for mobile devices that we see for laptops and desktops. So they're trying to spy on us. They're trying to capture our personal information. They're trying to extort money from us. They're trying to mine cryptocurrency. In terms of numbers, that's kind of how it's looked since 2015. So you can see we've got massive, massive growth. And this is true of targeted attackers as it is of random attacks. Now, I can't go into too much detail about APTs. There isn't the time. But this is the top 10 attacks from last year in terms of top 10 attackers, also the sectors they were going after, and also in terms of their location. And the red in this case includes most attacked countries. But this is a worldwide phenomenon. There are few places, if any, in the globe that are immune to targeted attacks. One example, Carbonak. So these guys were looking to steal money, and they were using targeted attack techniques to do it. So they got in using social engineering. They tricked people into clicking on a link. Once they had a foothold in the organization, they were using that to move laterally to find the relevant people in these banks who actually had access to funds or could move money around. Once they did, they were either making international payments, or they were using money mule accounts and putting funds into those, or they were actually getting ATMs to dispense cash. And again, worldwide, and it's estimated that this first wave of Carbonak attacks back in 2014-15, they made about $1 billion. And that's what we know about. They've come back since then with other waves. So sometimes APT groups go quiet and then come back again. This was certainly true of Carbonak, notwithstanding an arrest of a key member last year. So what do we do about staying safe? I mean, you could spend hours talking about this as well. I've divided it into right now and tomorrow. But the reality is, you've got to drain the swamp while you fight off the alligators. There is no segregation in reality, other than logically. You'll notice that I've put some things in capitals. That's for a reason. The Australian Signals Directorate, which is their equivalent of GCHQ, affirms that about 70% of targeted attacks, not even the random ones, 70% of targeted attacks could be blocked, could be thwarted by implementing those 4 things. So default deny basically means put everything on a whitelist, and if it's not on the whitelist, it doesn't get to run. Patching your operating system. When an update's available, install it. Patching applications. Again, you need some mechanism to know what you've got installed, but patching straight away, really important. And then finally, just restricting local admin rights. Company after company, just give people laptops, assign people admin rights, and malware gets the same rights as the logged in user. So if I can't see certain data, the malware doesn't get to see it, not without doing a lot of work. If I can't access particular parts of the system, nor can the malware. So you can stop malware in its tracks just by judicious use of rights. And I'm not saying don't give people admin rights. I'm just saying even if you have them, and I do, don't log in routinely with them. Apart from that, you've got to think about the strategy. And even if that means for a small company, you're sitting with the back of an envelope writing down, what have you got? Where is it? How do we access it? Who has different rights to it? How might an attacker get in? Then you're starting to build up this kind of strategy. And one of the key things to finish off with is this thing about educating people. Most threats, whether that top of the pyramid or down at the base, involve hacking humans. So we have to find imaginative ways to patch our human resources. This is not easy. But if you think about how we've got people to wear seatbelts, or you think about how we've got people not to drink and drive, or how we all teach our children to cross the road safely, it is possible to do it. But it's about developing a culture. You can train me to use Microsoft Word. You can't train me to be secure. So it's about a culture, and that means not letting people through the front door if you don't recognize them. But it also means locking your computer screen when you go to the bathroom, right through to what you do about your data, securing that data, and understanding about the threats. And one great way to do this is to teach people how to be secure at home. Because if they get switched on to securing themselves, they'll get a lot of the policies you put in place to keep the organization secure. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that's been a useful overview. I think we've got a few minutes if anybody has any questions, so fire away.
Anyone, any questions from the floor? If you just bob your hand up and we'll get a mic over to you so everyone else can hear you. I've got one for you, if I could. The Trojan attacks into the banking industry. Estimation of how many actually make it through?
Attacks on banks directly, or
yes.
attacks on bank customers?
Banks directly.
Okay. I mean, I guess until Carbonak really, we weren't seeing direct attacks on banks. Mainly it was going after bank customers. Since then, we've seen a lot. You know, you think about the attack on the Central Bank of Bangladesh.
Yeah.
You think about Carbonak and its attacks. You think about Metal, GC Man. There's a whole group of families focused on that. I don't have data about how many are successful because, of course, it's difficult to know what the big picture is.
Sure.
But certainly successful. And the key indicator of that is the fact that the numbers are going up in terms of those attacks. But remember, you know, we're seeing a three-pronged approach, one at bank customers, one at ATM, which is the outlying infrastructure for banks, and another directly at bank infrastructure.
Right, okay, interesting. Any questions, guys, for David? Can we get a mic to the gentleman over here? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, couldn't you attribute the number?
Can't hear.
You can hear
Sorry.
me?
Doesn't seem to be working. That's why. Thank you.
The
Sure.
system's
Fire
too
away.
perfect, right?
I was just looking at your graph on the number of attacks have increased over the years.
Yep.
Couldn't that also be attributed to the number of devices being used today, the steady increase in the number?
Yeah, so the issue is, well, the numbers going up, isn't that also influenced by the number of devices? You're absolutely right, it is. You know, we all own collectively more mobiles than we do laptops, for example, or desktops. And if you consider in smart devices now, you know, that's everything from CCTV to smart meters to children's toys, then that number's gone bigger, and we offer a bigger attack surface. So definitely that is true. The number has gone up because of the number of devices we're using, for sure. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. If you've got any questions, you know, about this, or you want to know about our products, feel free to stop by our stand and have a chat. Thank you again.
Great, thanks very much, David.